When you boil it down into its most basic components, the horror film genre is about what scares us. However, even just within the three films I've chosen, what scares you might be tied to your beliefs, culture, or personal interpretation. So I've tried to narrow down the possible themes at hand and focus on a common thread between all of them. The Exorcist, The Shining, and Hereditary all revolve around family. Now, of course, the subject matter of the family is one that's very personal and close to many people's hearts. Ideally, they're supposed to be the people that love for and take care of you, and the family unit is thought of as being held up by lifelong bonds that are unbreakable. However, being close to someone also comes with being close to their dark side, their flaws, and their vulnerabilities. All of these films address the dark side of the family, and they're great examples of the horror genre depicting the perversion or destruction of the whole family unit. First up to do this is 1973's The Exorcist. The Exorcist covers the story of a mother and daughter relationship that's torn apart by demons. Nowadays, this narrative has been done so much that it's really become its own subgenre, but even watching it now, a lot of the iconic scenes are still pretty disturbing, and not to mention back in 1973, there really was no comparison to it in terms of shock value. There's an interesting video which documents the unusual audience reactions at the time, showing people absolutely terrified, walking out, and sometimes even fainting. Now, it's good to keep in mind that this was around the time of the Satanic Panic, and that part of this reaction was a product of very real cultural, moral concerns at the time. But even then, there's still plenty in the movie that stands the test of time. At its heart, this is a story about a mother that's powerless to stop her child from suffering, and the question of how much it affects you is answered by how much you can put yourself in the mother's shoes. If you're connected to the characters at all, it's hard not to feel disturbed during brutal moments, like when Reagan is thrashing around on the bed, screaming for her mom to help her. Now, an important note here is that in the film, the supernatural forces they're not very subtle. When the demons attack the family, they attack directly by possessing Reagan, and many of the most brutal moments in the film are when they're speaking through Reagan, mocking her and her mother's suffering. This more traditional behavior stands as a sharp contrast to the supernatural forces in our next movie, 1980's The Shining. The Shining explores the possibility of a parent going insane and hurting the people that he's supposed to protect. It's a very unnatural idea, and the narrative uses isolation as a catalyst for each family member's dwindling sanity. To create this sense of isolation and to convey the sheer size of the Overlook Hotel, Kubrick used an array of wide-angle shots. This is very unusual. Most of the time, horror films keep to close-up shots to create a sense of claustrophobia, and they use quick cuts when a scene needs to be intense and frantic. After all, if the audience is limited to the small space around a character's face, it's much easier to catch them off guard with what might be lurking around the corner. But in The Shining, it's the complete opposite. Notice how little of the frame the characters are occupying in these shots. Not only does this perspective give off a sense of isolation, it utterly shocks the audience when something supernatural finally shows itself. We spent so much time getting to know the layout of the hotel, completely sure that nothing else is there with the characters, and then suddenly,
Hello, Danny. Come and play with us.
additionally, the film's characters act in a more emotional, cartoonish manner as compared to other horror films of the time. When Jack loses it, he moves with strange, erratic motions. This was a conscious decision on Kubrick's part and was influenced by the atmosphere on set. Kubrick is still famous for his perfectionism, and there's a documentary which shows some of the pressure and conflict involved in making the movie. Kubrick used this to his advantage and used the shots where the actors were clearly more worn out and expressed their emotions in unnatural ways.
Come on, Peter. Wake up.
Hereditary revolves around one family's troubles and the string of tragedy following the death of the grandmother, who was a domineering matriarch. I see this as the quintessential example of what people can find so terrifying about horror that deals with the family. It feels inescapable. As a grand family slowly falls apart, you get the sense that you're drowning in grief and pain along with them. Jasmine Crittenden, in her analysis of the film, puts it pretty well. When no longer an anchor of safety and security, the home can come to represent horror of the most terrifying and inescapable kind, that which lies within. Much of the drama and tension comes from the sympathy you feel from some of the characters just starting to get back on their feet, only to be met with some other horrible event that's out of their control. Much of the plot is driven by the mystery that surrounds these unfortunate events, characteristics of Noel Carroll's claim that works of horror are often dramas of discovering the existence of something impossible. Over the course of the narrative, we come to find out that many of these tragic occurrences are the work of something impossible. They're the work of a cult that's trying to summon a demon so that it can inhabit the body of one of the family members. Of course, by the time we find out, it's already too late, and just like the family drama that's been unfolding over the course of the film, the events that follow have a sense of unavoidable fate. Finally, let's analyze a full clip from the film. In this scene, Peter, the eldest son in the family, is frantically trying to drive his little sister to the hospital during her reaction caused by a severe peanut allergy.
Charlie!
There's a lot here that's expressed solely through visuals. The long shot right after Charlie's death swallows the entire frame in darkness, and we're left looking at how small the car seems in comparison to everything around it. This mimics Peter's desperation at this moment. He's completely overwhelmed, and the world around him seems infinitely large and incomprehensible. Afterwards, by keeping the camera to Peter's face and blurring the back seat, we can feel exactly what he's feeling. He knows his sister's body is in the back seat, but he can't bring himself to even check for the chance that she's alive and actually look at her body. He knows what's happened and that it's his fault. After this, he barely squeezes out some words, but just gives up, and we cut to a shot of his foot on the brake. He takes a painfully long time to take it off, because he dreads the thought of getting home and living out this nightmare. In a way, just taking his foot off the brake is admitting that what's just happened to his little sister is reality, and it's not a reality that Peter wants to live in. Finally, the film even expresses Peter's sense of time. We abruptly cut from the shot of the car on the road to him finally arriving home. Driving like that, it must have taken him hours to get home, but since he's still processing his sister's death, it feels like only seconds have passed. By cutting like this, it also only feels like seconds to us. Alright, well, that's it. Thank you for watching. I hope I did some of these films justice and kind of conveyed why this is probably my favorite film genre. Thank you.